Hello, welcome to the channel Beyond 1800 with BTS. We are going to read another chapter, the second to the last chapter of 7 chapters of Beyond the Story, the 10-year record of BTS. And I'm very excited because we're nearly done. Well, one more chapter to go. And it's been a very interesting story. For those of you who have been watching the BTS Monuments Beyond the Star on Disney Plus. So they're now on their fourth episode. So there are 4 episodes there, very fascinating as well. A lot of details that are not in the book, but also quite a lot of overlaps with the book as well. But it's just nice to see them and then hear them tell the story. Oh, have you caught the Sachita episode of Yoongi with IU? Oh, that was also another terrific episode. Lots of things that I didn't know about IU's career, and it was really good to learn more about, how she started and what she thinks about her career and what she wants to aspire to as she, because I mean, her longevity is incredible. She started when she was 16 and now she's 30. So she's been in the business for 15 years. So, correction to the previous video where I said it was about 20 years. So, it's 15 years. It's quite long too. So, yes, I have tremendous respect and admiration for IU. She is a singer-songwriter and she produces as well. She has her own show, Palette. And so she's a wonderful MC. So it was really fascinating watching her also because she knows how to do things, making observations and asking questions. And sometimes she becomes the one interviewing Yoongi. So no, they have great dynamics. And please watch that episode. So okay, so shall we proceed? So these chapters, chapter 6, the world of BTS. Subheading: Army Time. When BTS released their new album, Map of the Soul Persona, on April 12, 2019, at 6 p.m., a large part of their Korean audience on the music streaming platform Melon were unable to listen to it right away. Melon's servers had crashed due to the sheer number of simultaneous access attempts. Wow. This was something unimaginable for anyone living in the Republic of Korea. In 2019, 10.28 million Koreans used music streaming services, with Melon boasting 4.1 million active monthly users. For an entire platform of this magnitude to go down because of the demand for just one album was like a pebble being thrown into the ocean, displacing all of its water into space. This had perhaps been foreshadowed about 2 months before the release of Map of the Soul Persona by Armypedia, a kind of treasure hunt hosted by Big Hit Entertainment as a special treat for Army. Jumbotron teasers were shown in Seoul, New York, LA, Tokyo, London, Paris, and Hong Kong. And Army around the world looked for 2,080 puzzle pieces scattered across the globe, and the internet to piece together. The number 2080 refers to the 2080 days from BTS's debut on June 13, 2013 to February 21, 2019, when Armypedia was revealed, meaning each piece of the puzzle was a day in the life of BTS itself. Army assembled the pieces with breathtaking swiftness. Each puzzle piece had a QR code. Scanning this QR code brought you to a quiz question about BTS that, when answered correctly, would fill in a record of the Armypedia for that day. The Army who had answered correctly were free to upload their personal BTS memories in the form of the text, photos, and videos. Armypedia showed that BTS by then had grown into a gigantic phenomenon that would draw a global response through something as humble as an event centered around the memories they shared with their fans. A few weeks later, 2 offline Armypedia after parties of a sort were held in Seoul. So these after parties, footnote, Run Army in Action was held on March 10 at Seoul City Plaza, and Army United in Seoul was held on March 23 at Oil Tank Culture Park. At the time, the Korean media talked of these special events as BTS events without BTS. While the members of BTS did appear in brief surprise video performances on the large screens set up at the event spaces, they did not attend in person. Still, the Army gathered in arena audience magnitudes, singing along to their songs, coming out of the large concert speakers, taking part in the proceedings prepared by BTS and Big Hit Entertainment. Armypedia and the events that followed were a preview of what Army would show the world once the new album, Map of the Soul Persona, was released. Army would now gather in large enough numbers to attract the attention of the media, even without the physical presence of BTS. Which is how, while Map of the Soul Persona was a BTS album through and through, it was Army who became the star of the album. Subheading: You. Map of the Soul Persona begins with a story about you. That is Army. The concept behind this album was inspired by a recurring thought Jungkook had as he promoted the Love Yourself series. I wondered what life was like for all the people who liked me. Jungkook's wish to know more about Army was not out of mere curiosity. I sometimes wonder when I'm with people whether I put on a mask in front of them. It is important to strike a balance between me as an artist and as a person, but I sometimes wondered if I'd begun to lose track of what I was doing. BTS had always treasured their one row of fans who had come to see them in their very first TV music show performance, and now they were doing stadium dates with thousands of Army. This increase in their number of fans also meant an increase in the number of languages in which Army were expressing their love, support, and thoughts for the group from around the world. But why the boys were receiving so much love and what the lives of the people who loved them were like, they had no real way of knowing. Instead, There were countless cameras, or the interest of the media, or anyone who wanted to play the pundit about BTS, trying to fill in the gap between BTS and ARMY. Jungkook says, I think we got to where we were because we met the right era and the right people. But it was a lot of pressure. I did not think I was quite right for this position, and there were things I had to do in order to become someone who was right for it. And there are always things we needed to put more effort into if we wanted to do the things we'd set out to do. As Jungkook says, the things BTS needed to do grew in proportion to their explosive popularity, and it was not easy to maintain the honest and candid selves that they wanted to show ARMY. But BTS are a group that, long before streamer became a widespread word, had vlogged on YouTube about their travails as trainees, whose debuts were imminent. Even after they had become an international sensation, touring stadiums around the world, they would still, after a performance, switch on their V-Live cameras and communicate with ARMY. Map of the Soul persona was the product of a special relationship between a gigantic fandom and their beloved artists who had become global stars in the age of smartphones and YouTube. BTS, even in the midst of the idol industry, wanted to show their real selves as much as possible and had become superstars as a result. And when they thought they'd reached the very top of what they could achieve, they wanted to communicate more with the fans who had come all this way with them. So the Map of the Soul persona, the sixth mini album, was released on April 12, 2019. There are 7 tracks. Intro persona, that's RM. Boy with Love featuring Halsey, a mega hit. Microcosmos, that's another beautiful song. Make It Right, oh yes. And I think, is this also the one that Ed Sheeran worked on too? I think so. Yes. Then Home, that's another beautiful song. Oh, J'aime vous is a beautiful song. So this has all hits. And of course, the powerful 7 is Dionysus. Yeah? Or Dionysus, whichever. But that performance in the 2019 MAMA, fantastic. Just mind-blowing. Yeah, you should catch that one. Wow. Okay. Heading or subheading. From Saudi Arabia to America. Unless we were to ask every single ARMY personally, we would never be able to tell how far Jungkook's hopes managed to reach. But after the release of Map of the Soul persona, it was clear ARMY wanted to pass on something to BTS. On October 10, 2019 local time, BTS were preparing for their performance of BTS World Tour Love Yourself, Speak Yourself, that would be held the next day at the King Fahd International Stadium in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. After the full rehearsal, Jungkook and Jimin decided to practice one more time the part where they would perform a medley of BTS's hit songs. We're so sorry, the two begged the crew for their understanding. The temperature in Riyadh had soared to 40 degrees Celsius, and for any first-time visitor to the city, Even walking the streets in this weather was an endeavor. The two were apologetic for asking the crew to stay on longer in the heat as the rehearsal time dragged on, even though they were the ones who had to sweat the most. But they weren't the only ones who were trying to overcome the heat. All throughout the rehearsal, there were endless cheers coming from outside the stadium. Army had surrounded the arena. From the outside, Army could only hear muffled sounds of the rehearsals taking place, making it almost impossible to tell the members' voices apart. Still, whenever the songs changed, Army sent up another collective roar and called out the names of the members. The sight of women wearing traditional niqab that covered their forms and faces, shouting the names of the artists they liked, was surely an uncommon sight in Saudi Arabia. Jungkook remembers what the concert was like at the time. Every country has their own culture, but I had hoped, during our performances at least, our audiences would allow themselves to express everything in their hearts in that moment. Their traditional clothing must have been quite hot to wear, but they were having so much fun and being wonderfully loud that I felt incredibly thankful to them. As Jungkook says, the audience there, who were mostly women, were able to be as loud as they wanted, as they enjoyed themselves despite the heat. Sure, it was only a brief moment, but BTS were showing a new way of how mainstream music was being accepted in Saudi Arabia, a kind of change, and that such a change was being led by over 30,000 women of around the same age was in itself something to give pause. America was the same. Every US media outlet commented on the women in their teens and 20s who had gathered to see BTS's shows. The group's Saturday Night Live performance on April 13, 2019, on NBC in particular, was a milestone for them. In teaser spots for the episode, that week's host, Emma Stone, and members of the Saturday Night Live cast acted as stand-ins for Army, where Stone says, "I'm camping out on this stage until BTS gets here." For some, however, this was not an exaggeration. NBC's Today Show was already reporting on Army, who were camping out for days in front of the studio for a chance to get tickets to SNL. This stage was also their first since the release of Map of the Soul Persona, and SNL was, as the name of the show implies, live. The stage they had to perform on was also smaller than the average music show stage on Korean live television sets. Not even having the time to get nervous about appearing on SNL, the members were said to all have wondered how they were going to execute their performance for a wholly unfamiliar stage and audience. The stage is so small. What do we do about our choreography? Careful of collisions and injuries, the members discussed and choreographed their movements right up to the moment they were live. The members say similar things in their memories of the appearance. A footnote: oh, wait, hang on. Okay. So, the members say similar things in their memories of the appearance. It did not matter how big the physical stage was, the fact that it was SNL was what made it important. Just as they had expected, this small stage became BTS's Ed Sullivan Show moment. Footnote: The Ed Sullivan Show, which ran from 1948 to 1971 on CBS, was the first American stage for the Beatles, who made their appearance there on February 9, 1964, when their album became a smash hit in the United States. Not only did music journalism outlets like Billboard and Rolling Stone discuss BTS's SNL performance and the public's response, but the New York Times and CNN covered the story as well, and the very next day, BTS's Google search metrics spiked the highest for their entire promotional cycle for Map of the Soul persona. And now, it wasn't just the Korean media, but journalists around the world who were asking the question, why do fans love BTS so much? And I will leave that there, and we will find out in our next reading. So thank you again for joining me. This has been Beyond 1800 with BTS. Until next time, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening.